Is the Iron Age upon us? There's been a decent amount of talk about the current age of comic books, and there's a lot to talk about. Falling sales, the weakening grip major publishers hold on the industry, the creative and ideological division that splinters both fans and creators alike, the rise of crowdfunding. But a more meta conversation has been brewing, and that is, what do we even call the current age? I've only heard one answer given to that question, and that is the Iron Age. This is obviously a play on the gold, silver, and bronze naming conventions of previous ages, but those are mostly representative of their chronology, gold being the oldest and successively less precious metals representing the more recent eras. They don't really make any statement about the age they describe beyond that. The Golden Age was more or less the beginning of comic books as they exist today. Before the Golden Age, comic books were largely reprints of strips, and superheroes weren't really a thing. The Golden Age established the comic book we know and love today, books with original stories published on a regular schedule in that lovable floppy format. They were usually anthologies with multiple stories in one issue, though. The superhero was also established during the Golden Age, which began with the release of Action Comics #1 in 1938. The Silver Age followed and further established the foothold superheroes would have on the comic book industry. Beginning in 1956 with the release of Showcase #4, the Silver Age would see the rise of Marvel Comics and the proliferation of innumerable superheroes, many of which are still being written today, in one form or another. The release of Green Lantern '76 and Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen #133 in 1970 signaled the beginning of the Bronze Age. Comics became more grounded in reality, confronting current social issues and displaying more graphic content. The stories could get a bit preachy, but rarely at the expense of the story. They were just more reflective of the world around them than in the Silver Age, which focused more on the fantastical. Some people say the Bronze Age ends where the Modern Age begins, and some say the Copper Age rests in between the two. Either way, there isn't much of a distinction between the Bronze and Copper Age in terms of the comics themselves. If we're counting the Copper Age, it's the shortest age lasting from 1985 to 1992, and it's bookended by The Dark Knight Returns and The Death of Superman. Each age spanned around 15 years, more or less, and the Bronze, or Copper Age if you prefer, ended in 1992. That means the Modern Age is 30 years deep now. I can understand why there would be talk of a new age. The desire for a distinction between the past and present. That's most likely the reason a conversation about the Iron Age began. The Iron Age picks up the metal naming convention of the previous ages, but there's a more literal connotation behind the moniker. The actual Iron Age was the historical period where iron replaced bronze. Because iron is stronger than bronze, people required access to better, more durable tools and equipment. This in turn allowed them to work more efficiently and fostered a period of significant development. One obvious correlation I see between the actual Iron Age and the current age of comics, whatever we'll eventually end up calling it, is the development of crowdfunding, or what it seems to be turning into, direct sales. No, not those direct sales. I'm talking about the ability of an individual creator or a very small team to produce comic books independent of a publisher, bypass the traditional direct sales market, and sell directly to the consumer, usually through services like Indiegogo and Kickstarter. Crowdfunding gave a platform to creators that otherwise wouldn't have had the ability to get their comics produced, let alone into the hands of paying customers, or backers as the case may be. And as the traditional direct sales market continues to bleed readers, this new sales model is evolving alongside it, and may eventually usurp it, similar to the way iron replaced bronze a couple thousand years ago. This is a period of significant development in the comic book industry, or at the very least of change, and it's the creators forging the way ahead. Where this will lead is anyone's guess, but an amalgam of crowdfunding and independent publishing is likely a big part of it. Platforms like Alterna, Zoop, and Eric D. July's Rippaverse will become more the norm as creators begin to shift away from traditional crowdfunding and into more entrepreneurial roles. Of course, this is just speculation, but that's kind of what geeks do. Speculate about their hobbies. And while it is an interesting conversation, people living through an era don't usually get to decide what it's called. If we take the actual Iron Age as an example, it ended around 600 BC, but wasn't referred to as the Iron Age until the first half of the 19th century. To bring it back to comics, readers in 1940 didn't know they were living in the golden age of comic books. They were just enjoying the ride. I just assumed the present would always be the modern age. Then, after enough time passes, we'll give the preceding period a name, as has always been the practice. So maybe the question shouldn't be what do we call the current age, but what should we name the previous age, and when did it end? If I were to be so bold as to offer an answer, I'd say we've already lived through two ages since 1992. The first of these began in 1992, of course, and I'd argue ended around 2004 with the release of books like Identity Crisis #1 and Avengers #500, the beginning of Avengers Disassembled. The Dark Ages would be as fitting a title as any for this era. It encompasses the comic book crash and Marvel's bankruptcy, It was also a period of creative bankruptcy. Style over substance was the rule of the day. If it looked cool, it got published. Story and character be damned. The second age would have run from 2004 until about 2019 or 2020. This was a period of moral decay, heroes fighting heroes and behaving like villains. Maybe call it the Reign of Terror, where ideologues began shoving their beliefs down readers' throats at the expense of stories they were supposed to be telling. It was the age of self inserts and the even further degradation of the concept of heroes, because no one wanted heroes anymore, at least according to the narcissists hired to write them. It became more important to see themselves as the heroes instead of seeing heroes as something to aspire to. Comic book sales have dropped to the lowest they've ever been in the history of the industry as a result of this and numerous other factors. Two events occurred that could mark the end of the Reign of Terror and the beginning of what is being referred to by some as the Iron Age. Those would be the release of Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog Bloodhoney and DC severing ties with Diamond Distributors. If any of what I just said holds water, that would put us about 2 years into the current age, and that's way too early to try to put a name on it. We're gonna have to wait and see how things shake out, but we could be entering an Age of Enlightenment. Or the Iron Age. Whatever.